Dolphin Bites, what you should know before getting them done. Coming up next on Consultations by a Piercer, episode number 39. For those that are new to the channel, welcome to the Body Piercing and Tattooing channel. Hope you're enjoying the videos. Hope you're finding them helpful and useful, but you might not know who I am. My name is DaVo. I'm a professional body piercer and have been since 1994. I own and operate the Axiom Body Piercing Studio, located right here in Des Moines, Iowa, inside Skin Kitchen Tattoo. The group of piercings we're talking about today, and it's the last of the oral piercings because I've been going through these for what seems like an eternity, is a set of labret piercings done below the lower lip, done kind of even with the edges of the nostril or the edges of the septum, to make it look like a dolphin's going in and coming out. This was originally, I think, named after the genital piercing, which is called a dolphin, which is a male genital piercing. It's a Prince Albert style piercing, but instead of the one side coming out of the front, it goes deeper in. So it kind of has the same effect, but it's done with a curved barbell. So average healing time on this is going to be anywhere from 2 to 3 months, during which time you're going to need to clean twice daily using a sterile saline solution. Personally, I like NeoMed's Piercing Aftercare. Comes out in a fine mist, easy to use, great. If you cannot find that, there is a wound wash version that comes out instead of like a fine mist, it comes out like a squirt gun. So with those, you do need to do compresses. Both of the methods are like this. If it just comes out in a fine mist, just mist it, the piercing area, let it stay in contact for about 5 minutes. If it comes out like a squirt gun, take a sterile piece of gauze sponge, and if you don't have access to that, you can use a clean paper towel, fold it up, saturate it to the point where it's damp, lay it against the piercing, and do a compress for roughly about 5 minutes. Pat dry any excesses on there and leave it alone. Now, if you can't find NeoMed's Piercing Aftercare or Wound Wash, there are various other different brands on the market, some generic. The main things you want to look for: sterile. First off and foremost, it should be a pressurized can. Secondly, it should stay right on the packaging, sterile. When you turn it over, you look at the ingredients, it's going to say sodium chloride and purified water. Nothing else. No preservatives, nothing added to that. Usually, if it has preservatives in it, it's kind of a sign that it's not sterile because they have to add this stuff to make sure that it doesn't go bad. So you want to clean with that twice daily for the next, until the piercing's healed, which is anywhere from 2 to 3 months, or until you stop seeing the discharge collecting and depositing on the jewelry and the piercings get that indented or ingrown look to it. The one other thing I suggest doing for the outside is once a day in the shower, pull your hair and everything out of the way, stick your chin out, and let the water flow over the area. What we're doing with the saline cleaning and with the shower is we're trying to remove that hardened discharge that collects on the jewelry. The reason why is when it moves and shifts, it can agitate the piercing. It also can make it very uncomfortable. So if you get to a point where it seems like there's an obsessive amount of it or it just doesn't want to come off, see your piercer and have them clean it because there might be something else going on. Now let's cover the inside. This you only really need to do for the first 2 weeks. A couple times a day, I usually suggest in the morning and at night, rinse with a alcohol-free antiseptic mouthwash. Probably the easiest to find or the most common is Biotin antiseptic mouthwash. Also, it's a good idea to do warm saltwater rinses. Take distilled water, heat it up in the microwave just for a few seconds so it's warm. Drop in 1/8 of a teaspoon of sea salt per cup. Rinse that off and on for about 2 to 3 minutes, once or twice a day. If it feels really good, maybe do it a third time. Now let's talk about things you don't want to do. That good old-fashioned cross-contamination prevention. Common sense stuff. Wash your hands before you handle it. Try to handle it by the ends whenever possible. Really, the only time you have any contact with the piercing is when you're checking the tightness of the ball or end. The rest of the time, leave it alone. No oral contact, deep mouth kissing, or sexual contact for a minimum of 8 weeks. You are more acceptable to STIs during oral sex, so if you switch partners, practice safe sex the way you're supposed to. Do not stick unclean objects in your mouth. Things like dirty fingers, toothpicks, pin caps, sticks, I don't know, fire hydrants. Most of that stuff's not going to be clean, and you're introducing pathogens into your mouth. The other thing is, make sure that your utensils, like forks, knives, spoons, plates, etc., are cleaned on a regular basis. And do not share food items or utensils with other people. Never a bad idea to start with a fresh toothbrush the night of the piercing, just to be on the safe side. Keep your environment clean. Clothing, bedding, towels, anything that may come in contact with that piercing on a regular basis needs to be cleaned regularly and changed. Do not swim. I know you're going to see conflicting things on this one all over the internet. Here's the reality of the situation. Anytime you get in a body of water that is large enough for you to submerge your whole body in and then move around in it, it's going to be filled with microorganisms. You have an open wound on your body, actually 2 of them, which increases the likelihood of that foreign pathogen or microorganism working their way into the piercing and causing an infection. Yes, this deteriorates, the risk gets less the further along you are in the healing, but it's still a risk. Keep pets away from the piercing. Don't let them sleep in the bed with you, especially smaller animals like to sleep up by your face and steal your breath while you're sleeping. Now let's talk about trauma, swelling, and abuse. Do not sleep on this piercing. I don't know how you would do that, but don't do that. It'd be kind of hard to. I don't know. I'm sure you can figure out a way if you wanted to, but avoid sleeping on it. Do not spin, rotate, or move the jewelry. Also, do not chew on it or pull on it or touch it a bunch of times to make sure it still hurts. Leave it alone. Now, for the first week or so, anywhere from 3 to 5 days, sometimes longer, everybody's a little bit different. You're probably going to see some swelling. You're dealing with 2 piercings, so you might see a little bit more swelling than you would if it was just 1 piercing, and it's kind of more spread out. During that period of time, it's a good idea to stick with a diet of soft foods, especially when it's at its worst. Things like yogurt, smoothies, nutritional shakes, baby food, applesauce, anything you pretty much put in your mouth and swallow. Avoid things that involve a lot of chewing at first until that swelling recedes. Eat slowly and carefully. If it takes you half an hour to eat a meal, it takes you half an hour to eat a meal. It's going to be a little bit better than doing something that's uncomfortable and prolonging your swelling. Reduce talking if possible. Of course, I've already said this before, but do not play with the piercing. The more you play with it, the more movement it has, the more you're likely to see additional swelling or prolonged swelling. Cut down your intake of things that agitate it. Things like hot and spicy foods, things that are extremely warm in temperature. Tobacco, alcohol, vaping, cannabis, carbonated beverages, sports drinks that have a lot of salt in them or sodium. All those things are going to agitate the piercings and lead to more swelling. Basically, what it comes down to is if you're ingesting something and it hurts, don't ingest it. Like, for example, if you're drinking orange juice and it burns, don't drink orange juice. It's that simple. Other ways to reduce swelling is cold items, things like crushed ice, popsicles, etc., ice cream. Staying hydrated with cold liquids, especially throughout the night when you naturally dehydrate, because usually you'll see the worst of the swelling first thing in the morning when you wake up. If you've never had issues of over-the-counter anti-inflammatories such as ibuprofen, there's no reason why that wouldn't help a little bit. Also, sleeping with your head elevated above your heart will help reduce the amount of swelling you see first thing in the morning. Once the swelling is completely receded, you can slowly wean yourself onto solid foods. I really suggest kind of sticking with things that don't involve a lot of chewing or a lot of moving around in your mouth, especially things that tend to kind of collect in that space between your teeth and gums. Think like potato chips or crackers that kind of harden and stick to things. Try to avoid that stuff. It's a good idea at first if you're really, really nervous about it or just to be cautious. Stick with kind of meat and potato things that you can cut up into pieces and shove back into your molars and chew directly. Now, this is all going to get a lot easier once you downsize. I generally suggest downsizing to a shorter post within roughly 4 to 6 weeks. We put in a longer one to allow for that swelling, but once that swelling is receded and is completely done, there's no reason to have that longer post in there. Going to the shorter one is going to make it fit better, it's going to draw it away from your teeth, and it's going to make your life a lot easier. With any oral piercing, there's risks of enamel erosion, gum erosion, softening of the bones inside your mouth, and that's from the teeth. That can greatly be reduced by having the proper placement of the piercing and also piercings, and also downsizing the shorter jewelry. The shorter jewelry is going to have less contact with your gums and teeth and less movement, so thus it's going to be a lower risk. The other risk is swallowing jewelry parts. Usually I suggest doing this with threaded jewelry. From the standpoint, it really takes a little bit more for it to loosen up, but there's always that possibility that you don't notice that ball's falling off. You have a mouthful of food, you swallow that post. It's always a good idea to check tightness of balls at least once a week or ends. I generally suggest pick one day of the week like Tuesday, and that's ball checking day, and do it every single week. Put it in your calendar. Now let's talk about placement, angle, and jewelry. Placement with this is pretty much, like I said, kind of an alignment with the nostril holes. Sometimes they're a little wider, some a little less. It should fit into your anatomy. They're done off center. They're not done dead center. During the marking process, your piercer is probably going to make you make a lot of little funny faces, and this is more about seeing how much you move your lower lip and how that piercing or those piercings are going to look when you have movement and have different expressions. You should also, when you look at the piercing, do the same thing, kind of get an idea of how they're going to move and flow with the body. You should always look at the piercings up close and at arm's length. Up close, most people don't see you at that length. Most people see you at arm's length. So it's important to check to make sure they look like they're even from arm's length more so than up close. Because most people are not going to see you that close. So it's more about giving that illusion of looking like it matches the anatomy of your face, because nobody's face is perfectly symmetrical or perfectly straight. Now, you can do one at a time if you wish. I do suggest that you mark both of them when you sit down to do the first one, just to get a basic understanding of how the grouping is going to work together. This should only be done with libre studs, threaded. You could get away with threadless. The only problem I have with threadless is if the jewelry gets caught and pulled into the mouth, that end is just going to pop off and fly across the rim. Threaded, it has to loosen up completely and fall off. So it's a little less of a risk of swallowing jewelry and etc. However, there's no reason why this couldn't be done with threadless jewelry. It's just one of those things where, yeah, I'd rather have it a little bit more secure. Mentioned this already. Check the ends, check the ends, check the ends, and downsize on a timely basis. Now let's talk about pain, the piercing procedure, what it's going to be like to get pierced. On a scale of 1 to 10, most people say this is between a 2 and a 5 or 2 and a 4. Oftentimes, the first one will hurt less than the second one. That's just part of piercing. Your body alarm system kind of goes up every time you do an additional piercing. But usually it's not as bad as you probably think it's going to be. It's a little uncomfortable to have anybody working inside your mouth. Think like the dentist. When you go see the dentist, having their fingers in there and everything else. But for the most part, it's a fairly quick procedure and not very painful. I usually do this with forceps. We clamp the tissue, inject the needle from the outside inward to make sure that line, that placement is correct. Then we push the needle out with a threaded guide pin, and then hook the jewelry or thread the jewelry on the inside of your mouth. Remove the forceps, and then push the jewelry in. Remove the guide pin and put the end on. The part that usually takes the longest is that jewelry insertion and threading the jewelry. Immediately afterwards, you'll have a little bit of throbbing and aching that lasts a few minutes. Sometimes there'll be a little bit of slight bleeding either during the process or immediately after. Usually not too bad and not anything that's really going to be overly noticeable. Now understand, it's going to take a little while to adapt to having that jewelry in there. It's going to feel very strange at first, very foreign. Eventually, once you've had it long enough and you've adapted to having it in there, it's going to feel stranger to have that jewelry out than to have it in. Just be patient. Also, once you downsize, it all gets a lot easier. Anatomy. Most people do have the anatomy for this. The only thing that may dictate where it's placed and et cetera is where your gum line is and how things are going to work and the distance your teeth and gums are from your lower lip. But for the most part, most people can get this piercing done. Common reactions. You see redness, discolorization, heat, tenderness to touch, inflammation, swelling. On the off and on the outside for roughly about the first 3 to 5 days. For the inside, it's not uncommon to see a white ring of tissue form around the jewelry during the healing process. That's scar tissue. That's completely normal. It's also not uncommon to see kind of this yellowish stringy stuff that looks kind of like snot hanging off the jewelry. That's the discharge, just like the stuff that hardens on the outside. On the inside of your mouth where it can't harden, it kind of forms in these long strings, kind of slimy things. Don't worry about it. Next time you rinse, it'll fall off. Now let's talk about what you should consider additionally. This is 2 piercings. It means, and they can be done in stages. Now, if we do them in stages, that means that you're going to go through that healing process twice. But you're not going to have as much to deal with on each of them and as much adaption. You need to understand there's 2 of them, so it's going to take up much more space. It's going to affect eating more, talking, etc. This will affect eating and talking for probably up to a week, week and a half. Plan ahead. If you're involved with any type of thing where you're going to have to do a lot of talking or you're going to a special dinner, maybe postpone getting the piercing done or postpone that event until after the piercing is healed or get pierced after the event. If you work and you do a lot of talking in your work, it's a good idea to do this when you have a little bit of a break from work. For example, if you have a 3-day weekend coming up, maybe do it on Friday night so that you have Saturday, Sunday, and Monday to kind of relax and not have to deal with a lot of talking and get through that initial swelling problem. You will need to change your diet. So it's a good idea to go out and buy this stuff in advance and have it around the house so you don't have to run around and try to find it the day of the piercing. Downsizing. I know I've mentioned this numerous times, but you do need to downsize the jewelry. Do not leave the longer jewelry in. All you're doing is asking for gum erosion, damage your gums and teeth, and it to be really annoying. Downsize roughly about 4 to 6 weeks to a shorter post. You will thank me for it. Now, are you going on vacation or business travel or something where you're going to go on out of town? It's usually best to wait until either the piercing is healed to do this or piercings are healed, or to postpone the piercings until after you're done traveling. The problem is that there's a number of problems. The first one being is that you're in an environment that you have no control over how clean it is. You are not the person doing the housekeeping wherever you're staying. The other thing is you may be you may come in contact with a pathogen or foreign microorganism that you never came in contact with before and thus have no immunity towards. So it's a good idea to kind of, having an open wound during a vacation is just kind of not a good idea. The other thing is it's a hassle to take care of a piercing while you're trying to relax, and most people want to swim while they're on vacation, and you can't swim with a healing piercing. Now let's talk about employment, hobbies, sports, extra, activities. If you're involved or you work somewhere or you're involved in some type of sports activity, or I don't know, you're an actor or reenactment enthusiast, or I don't know, whatever you do. If there's a dress code involved in an organization of some sort involved, 10 to 1 there's a dress code. In that dress code, especially if you wear a uniform, doesn't involve or has probably prohibited people from having facial piercings or visible piercings. Meaning that you will either have to remove the jewelry to participate or work, or you're not going to be able to do that participation or work. So, and there's no way to hide these piercings during the healing process. Taking the jewelry out for any extended period of time, even after the piercings have healed, could cause the piercings to close. So it's a good idea to either always talk to whoever's in charge. Make sure that it's okay to have these piercings before you get them done. If they say no, then you need to wait until either you're done with that activity or, quit. So just keep that in mind. Don't get it pierced and show up and expect people just to put up with it, because more than likely they're not going to, and it's beyond their scope of influence. Well, that's all I have to say today about Dolphin Bites. If you have this piercing, please make some comments. Tell us about your experiences. Till next time, here's hoping you'll get piercings heal with ease and without a single issue. And if you're in the Des Moines, Iowa area, I hope to see you for your body piercing needs in the future. Have a good day, everybody. Take care, and we'll see you in the next video.